anybody has any questions, like Justin but none of them are going to be here anyway. Actually, I'll go.
I'm just getting the live stream going, and then I will, I'll let everyone in.
Great. I'm going to mute.
Welcome everyone to the finals of the 2020 Summit Cup. The Honorable Judge Klingensmith presiding. If I could have all of the advocates please just pop onto the camera.
I believe my co-counsel's just getting in.
I just let someone else in. I think we're fine. All right. So this is part of the setup aspect. I would just like all of the advocates to necessarily take a look at the participants. Do we have everyone in the courtroom who is supposed to be in the courtroom?
Your Honor, I believe we are waiting on Taylor Pride at this time. I'm looking through at the moment.
Okay. And I am going to make an announcement for the coaches. If we have any coaches watching that are in the room here, Ms. Heller, I see that you're here. I'm going to ask that you leave and you'll have to watch via the live stream. Okay. Great. And my understanding that the live stream is working. So we're going to check on that. Is there anyone else that the advocates need at this point?
Yes, Your Honor, just Taylor Pride.
Taylor Pride, my apologies. Have we had contact with the witness for Taylor Pride? I just want to make sure.
I just reached out to her. She has just gotten back to me and she let me know she actually wasn't advised that this round was taking place. With that in mind, Your Honor, I could reach out and let her know whatever it is that we would need to let her know in this case, just to get on as soon as possible.
That's fine. That's fine. Go ahead and take a moment.
Your Honor, Miss Pride has just informed me that she is going to be getting on right now. She was in her car, and she's getting settled in, and she'll be getting on as soon as possible.
And is that Ms. Johnson?
Caitlin Johnson, correct? Yes, I believe so.
Yes.
Yes, it is,
Okay.
Your Honor.
Great. And so you'll be Taylor Pride?
I will, yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there anyone else that we need at this point?
No, Your Honor.
No? All right. Welcome to the 2020 Summit Cup Finals. The Honorable Judge Vicky Klingensmith presiding.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
All right. Will the attorneys please enter their appearances?
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Grace Grimes, team designation Longs Peak. I am joined by my co-counsel,
Kevin Bentinker, Your Honor.
and we represent the plaintiff in this matter, Cam Donaldson.
Good afternoon. And for the defense?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Jack Ayers, here on behalf of the defense. With me is my co-counsel.
Good morning, Your Honor. Enrico Trevisani for the defense.
Welcome, everybody. I want to first check that the plaintiff is ready to proceed with this matter.
Yes, Your Honor.
And the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ayers. Let's, before we do that though, I want to check and make sure that there are no conflicts with any of the scoring jurors. In chat, let me know if there is any conflict at this time before we get started. All right, seeing none, then let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with swearing everybody in. If you all would raise your right hand and please indicate by saying I do that you will abide by the rules of this proceeding and conduct yourself in a manner that is honorable to this forum. Please say I do.
I do.
I do.
Do.
I do.
All right, excellent. So let me go ahead and call the case. I'm calling Cam Donaldson versus Karen Bozia, case number 082263. Do we have any housekeeping matters before we begin? Let's start with the plaintiff. Ms. Grimes, Mr. Ayers. I'm sorry, Ms. Grimes or Mr. Benker.
Your Honor, the plaintiff does not have any housekeeping matters at this time. We're ready to proceed.
Okay, and how about for the defense, Mr. Ayers or Mr. Trevisani?
Yes, Your Honor. First, our understanding is that you received a full copy of the case packet, including all of the exhibits. We just wanted to make sure that was true so that you could reference the exhibits as we discussed them.
Yes, I have.
Secondly, Your Honor, due to the limitations of conducting trial by Zoom, we asked that all objection arguments be heard constructively outside the presence of the jury.
Understood. Yes, they will be constructively heard outside the presence of the jury.
With that, Your Honor, no further housekeeping motions from the defense.
All right. So let's turn to motions and any motions from the plaintiff before we get started. Ms. Grimes, Mr. Benker.
Your Honor, the plaintiff does not have any motions in limine at this time.
All right, perfect. From the defense, Mr. Ayers, Mr. Trevisani.
Yes, Your Honor. Earlier, we met with opposing counsel, and we decided to stipulate to the inadmissibility of a certain piece of evidence. That would be the misdemeanor conviction of Karen Bozia. Both parties agree that we won't be mentioning it throughout today's trial.
Okay, perfect. Any other stipulations or anything else? From the
No, Your
defense?
Honor. With that, we're ready to proceed to opening statements.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with opening statements by the plaintiff. Who is doing opening statements?
I will be, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Grimes. When you're ready.
May it please the court. If anything, ever happens to me, be sure to have the police look into Karen. Those were some of Lou Donaldson's last words to his daughter before he was killed by his wife, Karen Baja. Early August of 2012. Cam Donaldson is standing outside her father's office. And inside that office, she can hear that something is very wrong. You see, she doesn't hear the usual rustling of papers or clicking on a computer. She hears her father's voice. And her father's voice is distraught. And she hears another voice, a woman's raised voice. Cam suddenly realizes that she's overhearing a screaming match between her father and her stepmother. Lou Donaldson is inside that office, and Karen Baja is furious. Cam's listening to this. Cam listens as the argument grows louder and louder and louder until finally the shouting stops when Karen storms out of the office. Lou Donaldson emerges from that room and he is visibly shaken. Cam has never seen her father look this way before, unnerved, the color all drained from his face. You see, Lou Donaldson had just announced to his wife that he was filing for divorce. Cam asks her father if everything is all right, to which her father replies, "If anything ever happens to me, be sure to have the police look into Karen." 2 weeks later, Cam is back at the office, but this time she's answering phones, running the books, as was routine. She starts winding down for the day when her father peeks out from behind his office door. 6 p.m., closing time. And as her father is leaving the office, he says, "I'll see you on Monday or on Sunday for supper if you want to drop by the house." Little did Cam know, those would be the last words her father ever said to her. That was the last time Lou Donaldson was ever seen alive. We represent Cam Donaldson. And you're going to hear directly from Cam today. She'll tell you how she worked side by side with her father, Lou, for 20 years. And her father would often joke that she knew more about the business than he did. She scheduled her father's meetings. She wrote the checks, answered the phones, ordered the supplies, ran the books. She did it all. And with Cam's help, Lou was able to turn his dream of opening an animal sanctuary into reality. And the reality is, members of the jury, the value of that estate grew to be $5 million. But today, that $5 million estate, the business that Cam and her father ran together for 20 years, now rests in Karen Baja's hands. The wrong hands. The hands of the woman who killed Lou Donaldson. That's why we're here today. Cam Donaldson has brought a wrongful death case against Karen Baja, but more importantly, with this trial, Cam is simply doing what her father asked of her. If anything ever happens to me, look into Karen. Well, members of the jury, something did happen to Lou Donaldson, and today you are here looking into Karen. And we will help you complete that task, because as the plaintiff, we carry the burden of proof. We have to prove our case to you by a preponderance of the evidence, and all that means is more likely than not. That's a burden we embrace. We have to prove to you, more likely than not, 4 things. 1, Lou Donaldson is dead. 2, Karen Baja's intentional conduct caused his death. 3, because of his death, his daughter, Cam Donaldson, suffered damages. And 4, those damages were caused by Karen Baja's conduct. First and foremost, today you will hear that the defendant herself had her husband declared dead. That's right, by the defendant's own request, Lou Donaldson is dead. Then, that same day, the very same day that she had her husband declared dead, she applied for payment of her late husband's $5 million life insurance policy. And that life insurance claim was paid out. On top of all that, nobody has seen or heard from Lou Donaldson in 8 years. Now, I want to be upfront with you about 2 facts. No one has found the body of Lou Donaldson, and no one caught the defendant in the act of killing her husband. But I want to be very clear about what the law requires and what the law does not require. You see, in very few cases is the defendant actually seen killing her victim. The law does not require a body, and the law does not require an eyewitness to the killing. But what we will show you is all of the evidence before and after the killing. Evidence that points to Karen Baja before the killing. Today, you will hear that there is only one person who threatened to kill Lou Donaldson. There is only one person who Lou Donaldson tried to get a restraining order against because he felt unsafe. That one person is the defendant. You're also going to hear how the defendant behaved after her husband disappeared, before anyone else even knew that he was missing. Karen Baja broke into Cam's office and stole a lockbox that contained Lou Donaldson's last will and testament. Then, 5 years later, after she had her husband declared dead, she produced a new will. A will that Cam had never seen before. Pay very close attention to that will, because we're going to call an expert witness, an investigator and forensic document examiner, who will tell you that the will that Karen produced was forged. And because of this forgery, Karen Baja, and Karen Baja alone, inherited his $5 million estate, sole ownership and control over his business, and an additional $5 million life insurance payout. There is no verdict that can bring Cam's father back. A trial cannot make up for what Cam has lost. But today we can accomplish one very important thing. You can take Lou Donaldson's estate out of the wrong hands and put it in the right ones. You can demand that the defendant return what she stole from Cam Donaldson and her father. If anything ever happens to me, look into Karen. After you have done that today, after you see that the defendant killed her husband, we're going to ask you to find the defendant liable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Grimes. Now from the defense, Mr. Ayers.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Opening statement.
May I proceed?
Yes, please do.
May it please the court. This wasn't a crime. It was a crash. It's late on a Friday night. And Lou Donaldson is in his favorite place in the world, the cockpit of a twin-engine Cessna airplane. Altitude 10,000 feet. All he can hear is the whir of the propellers. All he can see are the stars. Then the plane starts to shake. He's hit a spot of turbulence. But Lou Donaldson isn't worried. He's been flying planes for 40 years. He just needs to check the pressure gauge. So he reaches for his glasses. But they're not there. He forgot them. Members of the jury, after Lou Donaldson took off on August 17th, 2012, no one ever saw or heard from him again. But the evidence will show that's not because his wife killed him, disposed of his body, and managed to do so all without leaving a single speck of evidence. You'll learn that the explanation is far less sensational. An older man, flying alone, late at night, without his glasses, never came home. This wasn't a crime. It was a crash. Today, we represent Karen Beja. A few moments ago, the plaintiff, they tried to describe her to you. But I want you to meet her. Miss Beja, could you turn on your camera? This is Karen Beja. 19 years ago, she was hitchhiking down the side of the road when a man pulled in to give her a lift. Lou Donaldson. They were married a year later. Their marriage was volatile, but Miss Beja will tell you that she adored her husband. She'll tell you that in 2012, well, they were making their marriage work. When he disappeared, she was devastated. It's been 8 years. She never remarried. Thank you, Ms. Beja. Of course, as the defense, it's not our job to prove Ms. Beja's innocence. We have no burden in this case. The plaintiff, and the plaintiff alone, bears the burden of truth. They have to prove every single element of their case more likely than not. And they will fail to do that today because of two simple facts. This wasn't a crime, and it was a crash. So let's take those one at a time. The first fact that you'll discover is this wasn't a crime. Let's go back and re-examine the plaintiff's opening statement. And let's talk about a few of the words you didn't hear. Blood, eyewitnesses, crime scene, murder weapon, DNA, fingerprints, police. And members of the jury, you'll learn that the police, well, they investigated Miss Beja. You'll learn that the insurance company sent their own investigator. You'll learn that the plaintiff even hired a private eye. But they found no evidence, none, linking Miss Beja to her husband's disappearance. In fact, you'll learn that they found no evidence linking anyone to Lou Donaldson's disappearance. Members of the jury, the plaintiff are alleging that Miss Beja killed her husband. But after 3 separate investigations, the evidence will show that Miss Beja was never arrested, never charged, never even named as a suspect. That brings us to the second fact you'll discover today. Lou Donaldson died in a plane crash. You'll hear that Mr. Donaldson, well, he loved to fly. In fact, he owned so many planes that even his own family couldn't keep track of them. Sometimes he took short flights, but sometimes he flew further, out over the Gulf of Mexico, all the way to Central America. He always flew alone. And he usually didn't tell anyone, not his friends, not his family, not air traffic control, that he was going. On August 17th, 2012, Lou Donaldson left the office in his van. And the police, they searched for that van. They looked near his home, near his office. They looked all around town and, well, they found it. Parked at an airstrip next to a runway. And sitting in the front seat of that van were Lou Donaldson's glasses. The evidence will show that this is why no blood was found in Karen Beja's home. The evidence will show this is why no one saw Miss Beja disposing of her husband's body. The evidence will show this is why for the last 8 years, no one has found Lou Donaldson's body. The police, they searched his home, they searched his office, but they never searched the 2,200 miles between here and Central America. Both sides in this case agree on one thing. This case is a tragedy. Lou Donaldson, he lost his life. The plaintiff lost a father. Karen Beja lost a husband. But this tragedy involved no treachery. At the end of this case, we will ask you to find in favor of Karen Beja, because this wasn't a crime. It was a crash. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Plaintiff, prepare to call your first witness. Is it Ms. Grimes?
Yes, the plaintiff calls Cam Donaldson. May I proceed?
You may, thank you.
Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Cam Donaldson.
And why are you here today, Cam?
I'm here because I'm suing Karen Beja for the wrongful death of my father. I heard her scream a death threat at my dad, and then a few weeks later, he disappeared. Karen had him declared legally dead, and then she got all of his money.
What do you mean Karen got all of his money?
Well, there was a life insurance policy that It was worth $5 million. And then there was a will that was worth $5 million, and it left that estate to Karen.
And if Karen was the person listed in the will to get the money, why are you in court today suing her?
My claim is that she forged the will that granted her everything.
Okay, Cam, so let's back up just a little bit. Tell us about your father.
My father was a good man, a self-made man, and he really worked hard for what he had. He started out by selling used cars, and then he made a fortune. But animals were his true love, and when he got enough money, he opened Wild Wildlife, which is a sanctuary for big cats like lions, tigers, leopards, and the like.
And what was your role in the business?
So I was my father's assistant for 20 years. I really did everything for him. I scheduled his meetings. I wrote the checks. I answered the phones. I ordered all the supplies. I ran the books. I did it all.
Were you close with your father?
I was. I think about him all the time, and I miss him every day.
And what has that been like for you since your father passed?
It's difficult to put into words how much I miss him. It's just all been so painful. And I think back to my childhood memories with my father and how much we had a great relationship.
When was the last time you saw him?
It was Friday, August 17th, 2012. I believe he left the office at about 6 p.m.
What was that interaction like?
Well, it was business as usual. It was pleasant. He said, "See you on Monday," unless I wanted to stop by the house for supper on Sunday.
Did you end up seeing your father on Sunday?
No.
So when was the next time that you were at the office?
The next time I was at the office was at 6 a.m. on August 19th.
Can you tell the court what happened that morning?
Well, at 6 a.m., the alarm went off at the office. So I drove over there extremely fast to see what was going on.
When you got to the office, what's the very first thing that you saw?
I saw that the padlock on the front gate had been cut, and I saw that the fence at the back entrance of the office was broken.
Would you recognize pictures of the broken padlock and the fence if I showed them to you right now?
Yes, I would.
Please open your exhibit notebook to the documents that are Bates stamped 4 and 5. And for the record, I will mark this as exhibit P1 and P2.
I'm there.
What are P1 and P2?
P1 is a picture that shows the padlock that I was talking about that had been cut off the chain of the front gate. And P2 is a picture of the fence at the back entrance that was cut as well.
And are they fair and accurate representations of what the office looked like that morning?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, I offer into evidence exhibit P1 and P2, permission to publish to the jury.
One moment, Mr. Trevisani, your position.
No objection, Your Honor.
The court will accept P1 and P2 into evidence. And you may publish.
Cam, please describe for the court what we're looking at with exhibit P1 in this photograph.
So this is the broken lock that I was talking about. It was on the door of the office, and it was broken when I arrived that morning on August 19th.
Thank you, Cam, and I'll switch to exhibit P2. And if you could describe for the court as well what we're looking at with exhibit P2.
So this is the fence I was talking about, and the fence isn't typically like this. The damage to the fence was not there prior, so I thought that a break-in had happened.
Thank you, Cam. I'll bring these exhibits off of your screen. So you mentioned that the security alarm went off. You saw the padlock, you saw the fence. What's the very next thing that you saw?
I saw Karen Baja walking out of the office.
Was she alone?
No, she was with a man who was carrying a lock cutter.
Did you recognize that man?
No, I didn't.
And Miss Baja, did she have any items from inside the office?
Yes, she was carrying the lockbox that I kept locked in my desk drawer.
What did you store in that lockbox?
I stored my father's original last will and testament.
How did Miss Baja react when you showed up?
She was just smiling ear to ear. She told me that she won, and she told me that it was all going to be hers.
And how long was this after your father had disappeared?
This was the day after he was reported missing.
Were you the one who reported your father missing?
No, I was not. I didn't even know he was missing at this point.
So let's talk about your father's will for a second. You mentioned that you kept it in a lockbox. Had you ever looked at that will?
Yes, I have.
What did it say?
My father's original last will and testament that was in place for many years split the assets 4 ways. So my mother and I each got 25%, Miss Baja got 25%, and then the remaining 25% was intended to create a foundation for wild wildlife.
Was your father's estate ultimately split in accordance with the will that you saw?
No, it wasn't.
So what happened?
Karen ended up getting everything. She got all of my father's assets, his insurance payout, sole ownership of the business, everything.
How did that happen?
So there was a second will that Karen presented after the disappearance of my father, and she claimed that it was my father's original will, but it wasn't.
Did you ever see a copy of the will that Karen presented?
Yes, I did.
And would you recognize a copy of it if I showed it to you right now?
I would.
So Cam, please open to the document Bates stamped 14 in your exhibit notebook. For the record, I will mark this as exhibit P3.
I found it.
What is exhibit P3?
It's the last will and testament that Karen presented.
And is it a fair and accurate copy of the will that Karen presented?
Yes, of that will it is.
Your Honor, I offer exhibit P3 into evidence, permission to publish.
One moment, Mr. Trevisani, your position.
No objection, Your Honor.
The court will accept P3 into evidence and you may publish.
Ms. Donaldson, do you recognize exhibit P3?
I do, but this is not the will that I stored in my lockbox in the locked desk drawer. This is not my father's original will. This will grants Karen everything and completely cuts my mother and I out. It doesn't even set aside the last 25% that was supposed to be used to create the foundation for the wild wildlife that my father wanted to start.
Thank you, Cam. I'll bring this exhibit off of your screen. Do you know what happened to the original will and testament?
No, I have no idea.
Well, when was the last time you saw it?
The last time I saw it, it was in the lockbox in my desk drawer. And after I caught Karen breaking into my father's office, it was gone.
You know where your father was during all this?
Well, as I mentioned before, I didn't even know my father was missing at this point, and the last time I saw him was on the 17th. I also didn't hear of anyone alleging that he was missing at this point besides Karen Baja. She was the only one.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your father's relationship with the defendant before he disappeared. How would you describe their marriage?
Awful. It was very, very volatile, especially right before my father disappeared.
What do you mean by that?
2 weeks before my dad disappeared, Karen got all huffy and she threatened to kill him. They got into an argument and she screamed a death threat at my dad.
What did your father do in response?
For one, he was seeking a divorce, and after she threatened to kill him, he even tried to get a restraining order.
Did he actually file for a restraining order?
Yes, he did.
And would you recognize a copy of the document that your father filed with the court if I showed it to you?
I would.
Cam, please open to the document Bates stamped 16 in your exhibit notebook and let us know when you're there. For the record, I will mark this as exhibit P4.
I'm there.
What is exhibit P4?
It's a copy of the restraining order that my dad filed with the court.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of the document that your father filed?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I offer exhibit P4 into evidence, permission to publish.
One moment, Mr. Trevisani, your position.
Yes, Your Honor, we object. We object to substantially more prejudicial than probative under 403, improper character evidence under 404, and the potential for hearsay statements on the document specifically.
Ms. Grimes, your response.
Your Honor, if I may make an offer of proof and bring up the temporary restraining order for us to look at while we talk through this.
Sure.
So to begin with the 403 argument, Let's start by saying that the rule, the probative value must be substantially outweighed by any danger of unfair prejudice. This document is incredibly probative to our case in many ways, and I'll underscore 3. As Your Honor is aware, it is the plaintiff's burden to prove that Karen Baja killed Lou Donaldson. This restraining order is probative to the fact because it not only shows that the defendant threatened to kill Lou Donaldson, as you can see in number 1 there, but that Lou Donaldson was so concerned for his safety that he felt compelled to get a protective order from the court. Furthermore, Your Honor, as you can see, the big red letters denied at the top of this page, this demonstrates that Karen Baja still had access to Lou Donaldson even after he sought a temporary restraining order against her, giving her the means to kill her husband. And the third way that this is probative is, just for some temporal context here, it was filed on June 12th of 2012. 2 days later is the alleged will that Karen presented, is when she says that Lou Donaldson signed it. Now, it's highly, highly unlikely that Lou Donaldson sought a restraining order against Karen Baja, and then 2 days later named her sole beneficiary to his $5 million estate. This restraining order, at least the date on it, goes to the authenticity and the validity of this will. Now, as for the 404 objection, while 404 does prohibit prior bad acts, there are exceptions. And one of those exceptions lies within the plain language of 404B, and that is intent. We are using the fact that the defendant threatened to kill Lou Donaldson to show Karen Baja's intent to kill Lou Donaldson. Now, if I could address the hearsay here. Let's start with the second one. I am seeking a divorce from Karen Baja. This is admissible as a hearsay exception under Rule 8033, state of mind. It demonstrates Lou Donaldson's plan to end his marriage. Then to the third ground here for filing the TRO, I do not feel safe around Karen Baja. This as well is admissible under 8033, state of mind. It expressly shows how Lou Donaldson feels. As for the first one, Karen Baja defendant has threatened to kill me. The plaintiff is actually happy to constructively redact that statement. However, the jury has already heard about the death threats that Karen Baja made to Lou Donaldson through Cam Donaldson's testimony just prior.
All right, thank you. I am going to allow P4 to be admitted with the redaction of the statement has threatened to kill. I do find that the other statements do go to the state of mind of the deceased in this case. However, I would caution and limit the introduction of this exhibit to go to state of mind, and that is what the jury may consider that evidence of.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. If I may republish P4 to the jury.
Yes.
Mr. Benton-Core, if you could please republish Exhibit P4.
Just one moment while we get that redacted.
Okay. Cam, if you could please read for the court your father's grounds for filing this request, 2 and 3.
It says 2, I am seeking a divorce from Karen Baja. 3, I do not feel safe around Karen Baja.
And let's talk about that second one. I am seeking a divorce from Karen Baja. Did your father ever actually file for divorce?
No.
Okay, so I'll bring this off of your screen. When was the last time that you heard the defendant argue with your father?
The last time I heard them argue was about 2 weeks before my father disappeared. And I overheard them arguing in his office, and Karen was just furious. All of a sudden, she stormed out, and then shortly after, my father stepped outside.
And what did your father look like after this argument?
He was visibly shaken, upset, distraught, and I was really concerned because I had never seen him that way before.
Did you ask your father about this argument?
I did. And when I asked if he was okay, he said to me, if anything ever happens to me, be sure to have the police look into Karen.
Objection. Hearsay.
Response, Ms. Grimes?
Yes, this statement is admissible under Rule 8032 excited utterance. The statement that was elicited was from Lou Donaldson. If anything ever happens to me, be sure to have the police look into Karen. This was said while Lou Donaldson was under the stress of an exciting event, and I just laid the foundation for that. As you heard the witness testify, her father was visibly shaken, upset, unnerved, distressed.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may, Mr. Trevisani.
Your Honor, this does not meet the requirements of excited utterance. 8032 requires not only that the witness is still under the duress of an exciting event, but also that the statement itself relates to that startling event. And here, the statement, which we heard over and over and over in their opening statement, is if anything happens to me in the future, look to Karen as a suspect. An excited utterance simply cannot relate to an event that has not happened yet. As such, the statement doesn't fall under an exception under 8032.
Mr. Trevisani, I share your concerns, but I'm going to overrule the objection at this point. Ms. Grimes.
Ms. Donaldson, I'll ask you that question one more time. Did you ask your father about the argument?
I did. So I asked him if he was okay, referring to the argument. And he looked me in the eye and he said, if anything ever happens to me, be sure to have the police look into Karen.
Thank you, Ms. Donaldson. I have nothing further.
Mr. Trevisani, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may, thank you.
Ms. Donaldson, can you see me and hear me okay on your screen?
Yes, I can.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Now, your father, he owned airplanes.
He did.
He knew how to fly them, right?
Yeah, he knew how to fly them.
He was a pilot, right, ma'am?
Yes, he was.
Now, as you testified on direct, you and your father were very close, right?
We were.
You knew things about his habits, right, ma'am?
That's right.
Places he would travel.
Yes.
So you know that sometimes your father, he would fly out of the country.
That's right.
You know that sometimes your father would fly over water, right, ma'am?
Yes.
I want to talk about a date you mentioned on direct examination, I believe it was August 17th of 2012. You remember that was a Friday, right, ma'am?
Yes.
You saw your father at the office that day?
For the last time.
The last time you saw your father, that was around 6 p.m., right, Miss Donaldson?
That's right.
Your father, he didn't tell you where he was going, did he?
No.
But you do know your father owns a van, right?
That's right.
You don't know where he drove that van when he left the office at 6 p.m. that day.
That's true.
But ma'am, you do know that that van, it was later found.
Yes, it was found at an airport, but I do know that my father did not store any planes at that airport, and I knew that for a fact.
Ma'am, I wasn't asking about your opinion about where your father would store things. I'm just asking if you know that that van was recovered, right?
Yes, I do. And that's not my opinion. It's just a fact that he told me.
So the van was recovered at an airstrip, right, Miss Donaldson?
Yes, one that he never.
That wasn't my question. It was recovered at an airstrip, true?
Well, that part's true, yes.
And that airstrip, well, you'd agree with me, it was 40 miles away from the office.
Yes, it was. But again, he never stored any planes there. I know that for a fact.
All right, ma'am. Now I want to piece together what happened at that airstrip. Now, your father actually owned multiple planes, right?
He does.
In fact, well, you know that your father, he would buy and sell planes all the time.
He would.
He didn't always register those planes, though, did he?
No, he didn't.
In fact, well, you would say your father never registered those planes.
I don't know if he never did, but I know he often didn't.
You don't know that, ma'am?
I mean, I guess I know that he wouldn't register planes on occasion. Yeah.
On occasion, ma'am. To be clear, in your own words, you would say your father never registered those planes, wouldn't you?
Sure.
All right. So when he wouldn't register those planes because of that, well, you never knew exactly how many planes your father owned, right?
I don't know exactly how many, but I do know that he didn't keep them at that airstrip where his van was found.
I didn't ask you anything about an airstrip, ma'am. You didn't know how many planes your father owned.
That's right.
You couldn't tell the members of the jury if one of those planes were to go missing.
No, I couldn't.
You couldn't tell the members of the jury if one of your father's planes is in the Gulf of Mexico right now.
No, I couldn't.
Now, before August of 2012, you'd agree with me, your father, well, he had never had a plane crash before, right?
Not to my knowledge.
To your knowledge, ma'am, before August of 2012, your father had never flown without his glasses.
I'm sorry, sir, your audio cut out?
My apologies, ma'am. Before August of 2012, to your knowledge, your father never flew without his glasses.
Oh, he was blind as a bat. He would never fly. He would never even get on a plane without them. He was.
So that's a yes to my question?
Yes.
So let's talk about your claim against Miss Beja. Now, on August 17th, the night that your father went missing, well, you didn't see Miss Beja shoot your father.
No.
You didn't see Miss Beja disposing of a body, right?
No, I did not personally see that.
Miss Donaldson, the weekend your father went missing, you didn't see him with Miss Beja at all, right?
No, I don't live with them, so I didn't see them together.
So let's talk about some claims that you made earlier. Now, on August 17th, well, August 19th, excuse me, ma'am, you remember you told the members of the jury that Miss Beja broke into your father's office, right?
Yes, that's true.
You told the members of the jury that she stole financial documents and took a lockbox, right?
You did. I kept that lockbox in my drawer and she was holding it when she came out.
You told the members of the jury about a broken gate and a broken lock. Do you remember that, Miss Donaldson?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, permission to republish on screen. I believe it's exhibits 1 and 2 that are already entered into evidence.
You may.
Can you see that okay, Miss Donaldson?
I can.
I want to draw your attention to that photo of the broken lock that you talked about. Now, Karen Beja's not in that photo of the broken lock, right?
No, she's not.
Karen Beja, she's not in the photo of the broken gate either, right?
No, this was after the break-in.
You don't have any photographs of Karen Beja breaking into that office, right, ma'am?
No, these were taken after the break-in.
You don't have any video footage of Karen Beja breaking into that office and stealing a lockbox, right?
No, I don't.
Now, ma'am, you claim an alarm went off, right? That's why you went to the office that night?
Yes.
Did you bring a report from the alarm company that confirms that the alarm went off that night?
No, I don't have a report. It was from 8 years ago, so I couldn't couldn't get it.
Right. And you also mentioned that there were police there that night, right, Miss Donaldson?
Yes.
Multiple policemen, right?
Yes.
How many police reports did you bring into court today?
I personally didn't bring in any. That would be a police officer who investigates job to bring them in.
And you said that Karen Beja, well, she had broken in. She was stealing, right? You're saying this was a robbery?
Yes, it was.
Did you report that robbery to the policeman?
Well, when the police got there, they tried to speak to Karen, and she told them that, she wouldn't take any questions, that they had to speak to her attorney.
So that's a no. You never reported a robbery to the police.
Well, I told them about it that day, but they tried to talk to her, and she said she directed all questions to the attorney.
Did you tell the police about your father's will?
That was part of their investigation eventually, I believe.
So to be clear, you never filed a police report, even though you told us you saw Miss Beja committing a robbery, right?
I thought that was their job.
Again, ma'am, I'm not asking about what you thought. I'm asking about what you did. And you never filed a police report.
Yes, I never personally did, because I believe that they were taking care of that for me.
So let's talk about why you decided to bring this lawsuit. Now, your father's estate, it was worth something like $5 million when he disappeared, right?
That's right.
You thought that you were in his will.
The original will that he had for many years, yeah, my mother and I were both in it, and the foundation. That's right.
So you'd agree with me, you thought you were in line to inherit a quarter of that estate.
Yeah, that's fair.
It'd be fair to say, ma'am, that as you sit there today, you haven't received a single penny of your father's fortune, right?
Right.
You'd like that money, wouldn't you, Miss Donaldson?
Yes, but I think what I want more is justice for my father.
That's a yes to my question, ma'am. You'd like that money?
Yes, and I would like the money, but I also want justice for my father, sir.
Thank you, Miss Donaldson. Your Honor, we have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Trevisani. Ms. Grimes, redirect.
Yes, Miss Donaldson, did you hire anyone to look for your father?
I did. I hired Taylor Pride.
And did Karen Baja hire anyone?
I don't believe she hired anyone to look for him.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Donaldson. Thank you, Ms. Grimes. Plaintiff's next witness.
Yes, it has been stipulated by and between parties that the Carl Bannister deposition will be constructively read in its entirety.
Okay.
With that, my apologies. With that, Your Honor, plaintiff's called Taylor Pride.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bencourt. Ms. Pride, when you're ready, Mr. Bencourt.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Taylor Pride.
What do you do, Ms. Pride?
I am an investigator and forensic document examiner.
Okay, Ms. Pride, let's talk about your credentials. How did your career start?
So I started off with the Pioneer Police Department as a patrol officer, and shortly thereafter I was promoted to detective.
How long were you a detective for?
16 years.
As a detective, what did you investigate?
I investigated a wide array of crimes, ranging from economic crimes to murders.
So what did you do after your time with the police department?
I eventually left Pioneer Police Department and started my own private investigator firm.
Ms. Pride, just hopping back to your time with the police department, did you ever investigate forgeries?
I did.
Were you assigned to any specific units within the police department?
Yes, from 2002 to 2008, I was with the Economic Crimes Unit.
And as part of your work with the Economics Crime Unit, did you analyze handwriting?
I sure did.
Do you have any certifications to analyze handwriting?
Yes, I received a certification from the American Board of Forensic Document Examiners.
Are you still qualified to practice in this field?
I am. I continue to actively practice in the field. I attend yearly seminars and I recertify with the American Board of Forensic Document Examiners every 4 years.
Now, Ms. Pride, without telling us what your conclusion is, were you able to come to an official conclusion in this case?
I was.
And can you tell us what facts and data you used to come to your conclusion?
So I wanted to look at a wide array of facts and data. So a couple things I looked at were documents of Lou Donaldson's known signature. I reviewed the purported will produced by Ms. Baja. I conducted interviews of the alleged witnesses to the will. I had one of my employees even fly out to Costa Rica to look for Mr. Donaldson following a tip that that may be where he was. And I also reviewed what I was able to from the police investigation.
What principles and methods did you use to reach your conclusion?
Well, with over 20 years of experience in the field, I relied on my experience in those 20 years. I examined Mr. Donaldson's handwriting behaviors, and I also examined the circumstances underlying his disappearance. And with the totality of my personal investigation, I used those methods to come to my conclusion.
Did you reliably apply those principles and methods to the facts of this case in coming to your conclusion?
I did.
And are all of the opinions that you're going to tell us to a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Absolutely.
Your Honor, we offer Ms. Pride as an expert in forensic document examinations, qualified to give her opinion on the authenticity of the signature on Mr. Donaldson's last will and testament.
Mr. Ayers, your position?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. At this time, the court will receive Ms. Pride as an expert in forensic document examinations. Mr. Betancourt.
Why are you here, Ms. Pride?
In 2017, I was hired by Cam Donaldson to investigate her father's disappearance and to investigate the authenticity of the will that Ms. Baja produced.
Ms. Pride, what conclusion did your investigation lead you to?
It's my professional opinion that Karen Baja has produced a fraudulent will and that the signature allegedly belonging to Mr. Donaldson on that will is forged.
What led you to that conclusion?
So I completed a handwriting analysis on the will, and given the conclusions I made in the handwriting analysis, in addition to the circumstances surrounding Mr. Donaldson's disappearance, I was able to come to that conclusion.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you completed this handwriting analysis. Did you conduct a forensic document analysis on the last will and testament?
I did.
Your Honor, Exhibit 14, which has been pre-admitted as P3, permission to republish it to the jury?
You may.
Now, Ms. Pride, can you explain to the jury what it is we're looking at?
So this is the alleged last will and testament that Karen Baja produced to the court.
And can you explain to us how you would go about conducting a forensic document analysis on a document like this one?
Yes, so it's a 3-step process. The first step is you want to obtain known signature samples from the author. So in this case, you wanted to obtain, what you already knew belonged to Lou Donaldson. Step 2 is to analyze the known samples, and you want to look for consistencies among the samples. So at this point, you're looking at shapes, curve, angles, strokes, direction, letter height. But most importantly, you're looking at how all those letters connect to form one cohesive signature. The third step is then to compare the known samples that you have with the question sample. And here you're looking for any signs of discrepancy. So you're looking at retouching, at hesitation, at quivering lines, or strange marks.
Ms. Pride, since you gave us a 3-step process, let's do it step by step. So step 1, what samples that you knew were Lou Donaldson's were you able to obtain?
So I collected 3 samples in my investigation. The first one was a signature from Lou Donaldson's state-issued driver's license. The second signature I obtained was from the temporary restraining order. And then finally, I collected a note that Mr. Donaldson wrote to Cam Donaldson in May of 2012. I also reviewed additional signatures that were contained in the report of Chris Renard, who is an insurance investigator.
Now, Ms. Pride, would you recognize that signature comparison if you had it in front of you?
I would.
Ms. Pride, please turn to the exhibit Bate Stamp 7 in your exhibit notebook and let us know when you're there.
I'm here.
So what is exhibit 7?
Exhibit 7 is the signature comparison that Chris Renard did.
Did you review that document informing your expert opinion about the handwriting?
I did.
And is that a fair and accurate copy of the document you reviewed and relied on?
It is.
Your Honor, we offer exhibit 7 into evidence as P5. Permission to publish it to the jury?
Okay. Mr. Ayers, your position?
No objection.
All right. P5 will be admitted and you may publish.
And Your Honor, just permission to zoom in on the signature specifically?
You may.
Now, Ms. Pride, can you explain to us what it is we are looking at?
So here you're looking at the top two signatures, known signature 1 and no signature 2, are the two known signatures I collect, or two known signatures of Lou Donaldson. The bottom signature, which is the question signature, is the signature on the purported will that Ms. Baja produced.
So Ms. Pride, take us through step 2 of your analysis. What characteristics did you find in Mr. Donaldson's known signatures?
So there were a couple characteristics. So in the known signatures, you can see that the second O in Lou has an extra loop. The second O in Donaldson is what we call a lazy letter, so it's often not clearly written out. You can also see that in the last N in Donaldson, it's also a lazy letter. Most common that I noticed is that the pen is rarely lifted in the known signatures. So you can see that it's kind of one fluid motion rather than lifting the pen to mark out every definitive letter. You can see that particularly in the letter D, where the D is written in 2 motions, but the pen is rarely lifted and it looks like it's one fluid motion.
Ms. Pride, you testified earlier that you looked at 2 additional signatures, one on the restraining order and one on a letter that Lou had left for Cam. Did they have the same exact similarities as the 2 we're looking at here?
They did.
So take us through step 3. What happened when you compared those known signatures to the signature on the last will and testament?
Well, you can see that the question signature is clearly not belonging to Lou Donaldson. You can see that the first O in Lou has this strange double loop that is not consistent with the other signatures. The writer also clearly takes the time to write out every letter definitively. You don't see the lazy letters and you don't really see the fluidity that you see in the known signatures. Most obvious, you can see that there's a lot of pen lifting going on in the known signatures. You can see, like in the letter D in the questions, or in the question signature, I'm sorry. The letter D in the question signature is it's a lot less fluid than the known signatures. You can see how the question signature has a lot of quivering and shaking going on. And these are behaviors typically consistent with someone that's taking their time and trying to copy and forge a known signature.
Your Honor, I would ask that this exhibit be preserved for closing statements. Could we call it P5A?
Yes, P5A.
Thank you, Your Honor. And so, Ms. Pride, what do you know for sure about this signature on the alleged will?
I know it wasn't signed by Mr. Donaldson.
Thank you. And we could take that down now, Ms. Grimes. Ms. Pride, was there anything else in the language of the will itself that you looked at during your investigation?
Yes. So one strange phrase I noticed in my analysis of the will is that Mr. Donaldson provides a stipulation, should he die or designation, should he die or disappear. Disappear was very strange for me because that's not something you typically see in a will. Usually when a will is prepared, the person is preparing to die, not disappear.
And what was the date on the will?
The date on the will was June 14th of 2012.
Was the date on the will important to your investigation in any way?
It was.
And why is that?
Because just 2 days prior, on June 12th of 2012, Mr. Donaldson had petitioned the court for a temporary restraining order against Miss Baja. It was a little strange that there was this will leaving everything to her 2 days after he just asked for a restraining order against her.
Now, other than the strange language, the signature, and the date, was there anything else about the witnesses on the will that was important to your investigation?
There was. So there were 2 people alleging to have witnessed the signature on the will. There was Miss Baja, which I'm sure it is very obvious my concerns with Miss Baja being a beneficiary and a witness to the will. But there was also a Miss Samantha Lane who witnessed the signature.
And did you ever contact Miss Samantha Lane to ask her about the will?
I did contact Miss Lane, and she told me that she was coerced by Miss Baja into signing the will.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Your response, Mr. Bettencourt?
Yes, Your Honor. This is not hearsay. If permitted to testify, our expert will say that she spoke to Miss Samantha Lane, and Miss Lane told her that the defendant had threatened her, specifically that the defendant said that if she didn't lie to the police about witnessing the signature, she would feed her to the cats. First off, Your Honor, any statements made by the defendant are party opponent statements and they're not hearsay. Furthermore, these statements fall under Federal Rule of Evidence 703, as they were made to Ms. Pride during the course of her investigation, and they were relied upon while forming her expert opinion. When Ms. Pride was asked what she looks at when completing forensic document analysis, she stated she looks at the surrounding circumstances of the document. The testimony of the witnesses to a will, those are the very types of surrounding circumstances she was referring to. These are the types of facts and data that experts in this field rely on when coming to an expert opinion. And finally, Your Honor, these statements are not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. They're only being offered to show the effect that they had on Ms. Pride's investigation when she found out that one of only 2 witnesses had actually seen this will get signed.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may, Mr. Ayers.
First, as to the defense's contention that these are statements by a party opponent, that's not true, Your Honor. These are statements by Samantha Lane. Now, the statements contained therein are statements by Karen Beja, who would be a party opponent, but there's 2 levels of hearsay here, and any statements by Samantha Lane about what Karen Beja said are still hearsay. And as to the defense's contention that these fall under Rule 702 or 703 as evidence relied upon by an expert, while this expert may certainly rely upon those statements, the standard for the expert to then testify about those statements, about the content of that evidence, it's a far higher bar. For that, the defense has to pass a reverse 703 test. The evidence has to be substantially more probative than it is prejudicial. And opposing counsel has already said these aren't being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. They're only being offered to show that there were surrounding context that led this witness to determine the will to be false. Accordingly, there's very little probative value here, whereas the prejudicial value of an additional witness saying that Karen Beja threatened to kill her is massive, Your Honor.
Your Honor, if I briefly may respond?
Briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. This testimony is substantially probative to plaintiff's case, even if it isn't offered for the truth of the matter asserted. This last will and testament is crucial here. We are saying that Karen Beja killed her husband, and this is a critical piece of evidence. Evidence that one of only 2 witnesses, with the other witness being the defendant, did not actually see the signing of the will take place, that is highly probative. And if defense counsel would like, we can limit the testimony just to Miss Samantha Lane had not actually seen the signing of the will take place, if that helps reduce any issues with prejudice.
I'm going to sustain the objection. I do find it to be hearsay.
Move to strike any testimony from the witness about Samantha Lane's statements.
Yes, and the jury will disregard.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Bettencourt.
Ms. Pride, taking into consideration your handwriting analysis and all of the circumstances surrounding this will, what is your expert opinion?
My expert opinion is that the will provided by Miss Beja was fraudulent and that the signature of Lou Donaldson on that will was forged.
Thank you, Ms. Pride. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bettencourt. Mr. Ayers, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you see and hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Now, you're a private investigator, right?
That's correct.
You were hired by the plaintiff, Cam Donaldson.
I was, yes.
But you weren't hired just to look into handwriting, were you?
No, I was hired for two reasons, yes.
Right, and the second reason there is you were hired to look into the disappearance of Lou Donaldson.
Yes.
Now, as you said on direct examination, you're a former detective, right?
I am.
You have 16 years of experience as a detective.
I know it doesn't look like it, but yes, I do.
But with that 16 years of experience, you have experience collecting evidence, right?
That's correct.
And analyzing evidence.
That's correct.
You know that evidence, well, it can include eyewitness evidence, right?
Yes, which I took into consideration in this investigation.
And it can include physical evidence too, can't it?
Yes, there's several layers of evidence.
So let's talk about the eyewitness evidence that you found about Lou Donaldson's disappearance. You didn't find any eyewitnesses who saw Karen Beja kill her husband, did you?
No, I did not.
Didn't find any eyewitnesses who saw Karen Beja disposing of her husband's body?
No, I did not.
In fact, you didn't find a single eyewitness who even saw Miss Beja with her husband the weekend he disappeared.
No, I did not. It's a little strange, but real life isn't like crime shows, so unfortunately that happens sometimes.
Just to clarify, that's a yes, right? You didn't find a single person who saw Miss Beja with her husband the weekend he disappeared.
That's correct.
So let's talk about the physical evidence. You didn't find any blood that linked Miss Beja with her husband's disappearance.
No, but not all crimes involve blood.
Okay, but you didn't find any.
No, I did not.
You didn't find any skin that linked Miss Beja with her husband's disappearance.
No, I did not, but not all crimes involve skin.
No hair.
No, not all crimes involve hair.
Miss Pride, I'm not asking what other crimes involve. I'm really just asking about this one, or about the investigation that you undertook here. So, to be clear, you didn't find any DNA whatsoever that linked Miss Beja with her husband's disappearance?
No, not in this case, no.
No fingerprints?
No, not in this case.
As a former detective, you're familiar with the term crime scene, right?
I am, yes.
That's the area where a crime takes place.
That's correct, but counselor, if I may provide some context, not all crimes involve a designated one-stop crime scene. They're multifaceted, and I would know that from my 16 plus years as a detective.
Normally when someone's killed, there's a place where that person is killed though, right?
Sure.
You'd know that from your 16 years as a detective.
I do know that, yes.
Okay, you can't point to a crime scene in this case.
I can't know, but also there was a police investigation going on, so I don't know.
Not asking about any police investigation whatsoever. I'm asking about your investigation. And you can't point to a particular crime scene, right?
No.
You can't tell us where Lou Donaldson was supposedly killed.
No.
As a former detective, you're also familiar with the term murder weapon, right?
I am.
That's the object used to kill someone.
Yes, but not all murders involve weapons.
Okay, but you can't point to a particular murder weapon in this case.
Not in this case, no.
You can't tell us whether there was or wasn't supposedly a murder weapon in this case.
I can't, no.
You can't tell us if there was a murder weapon, what that murder weapon supposedly was.
I can't, no.
Lou Donaldson was declared dead in 2017, right?
Into August 18th, 2017, if I recall correctly, yes.
But he wasn't found dead, was he?
His body was never found, no.
Right, you never found his body.
No, neither did the police investigation, though, so.
Again, I'm not asking about the police investigation. I'd like to talk about yours. In your investigation, you never uncovered any evidence pointing to Lou Donaldson's body being discovered by anyone in the last 8 years?
No, I did not. It's weird.
Now, let's talk about that police investigation, because you did speak to some individuals in the police department, right?
I sure did.
Based on your investigation, well, Miss Beja was never arrested for Lou Donaldson's disappearance.
She was not, to my knowledge, no.
To your knowledge, no one was ever arrested in connection with Lou Donaldson's disappearance.
It's kind of hard to arrest people if they never even found a body. So no, to my knowledge, no one was arrested.
So let's talk about another possibility. You know that Lou Donaldson would sometimes fly to Costa Rica, right?
I did discover that in the course of my investigation, yes.
But he didn't fly commercial, did he?
No,
He was a pilot.
he was.
He owned his own planes,
He did.
and he flew his own planes.
Yes.
You know that his van, it was found at an airstrip, right?
That's right. It was found at an airstrip, and his glasses and his car keys were inside that van. It's a little hard to get away from home if you leave your personal belongings back home.
I'm not asking what's easy or difficult. I'm not asking about personal belongings. I was asking about the van. And the van was found at the airstrip.
It was.
And like you said, Lou Donaldson's glasses were sitting in the front seat, right?
They were.
Now, as part of your investigation, you actually sent an employee out to Costa Rica to look for Lou Donaldson, didn't you?
I did, because I wanted to make sure I was following all potential leads, as you mentioned earlier, Counselor. It's part of a complete investigation.
That employee couldn't find Lou Donaldson.
They couldn't, and they searched Costa Rica.
Right, they searched Costa Rica. But, Miss Pride, there's 2,200 miles between here and Costa Rica, right?
There is.
You didn't send anyone to search for Lou Donaldson anywhere in those 2,200 miles.
I can't say I did, no, but if a vast majority of that was ocean, I'm a little concerned that it would have been hard to look anyway.
That's right. It would be difficult to search for Lou Donaldson in the ocean, wouldn't it?
It would be, yeah.
As part of your investigation, well, you didn't look up the number of small plane crashes that happened in that 2,200-mile distance the weekend Lou Donaldson disappeared.
Well, I didn't, but if his plane crash was unknown, it wouldn't have come up in a search anyway.
So you wouldn't have found anything?
I wouldn't have found anything, no. But if Lou Donaldson wasn't wearing his glasses, he wouldn't have gotten even into the middle of the ocean. He wouldn't have gotten very far at all.
I didn't ask a thing about glasses here, Miss Pride. I'm just asking about your investigation. You never actually sent anyone to look in those 2,200 miles.
I didn't.
You never investigated the number of small plane crashes that occurred in that 2,200 miles.
It likely wouldn't have come up, but no, I didn't.
You didn't investigate if there were any unusual weather patterns in those 2,200 miles.
No.
Mr. Donaldson owned multiple planes, right?
I cannot definitively tell you how many planes Mr. Donaldson owned. I know that he flew planes, and often they were unlogged, but that's the extent of my knowledge.
Right, so just to clarify, you don't know how many planes he owned?
That's correct.
So if one of Lou Donaldson's planes went missing the same weekend he did, you wouldn't know?
No, but no one would know.
No further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Mr. Bettenker.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Pride, there has been a lot of questioning regarding physical evidence. When exactly were you hired to investigate this case?
In July of 2017.
And how many years after Lou Donaldson's disappearance was that?
That was 5 years after Lou Donaldson was reported missing.
Is it common to find DNA 5 years after an event occurred?
It's not, Counselor, and that's why I referenced the police investigation, is they had a much better shot of finding DNA evidence in their investigation than I did 5 years after the fact.
Ms. Pride, you were asked about a van that was at an airport. Did you find any evidence to suggest that Lou Donaldson drove that van to the airport?
I didn't. In fact, it was concerning that his keys and his glasses were left in the passenger seat.
Did you find any evidence to suggest that Lou Donaldson flew a plane out of that hangar?
No, I didn't.
Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Mr. Benker, your response?
Your Honor, I'm asking the expert witness about their investigation and what their investigation came to. I'm asking if she found any evidence or if she didn't find any evidence.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Ms. Pride, I'll ask you again. Did you find any evidence to suggest that Lou Donaldson flew a plane out of that hangar?
No, in fact, I found quite the opposite, with his glasses and keys in the passenger seat and his bank account being virtually untouched. Like the day of his disappearance, it was impossible that he could have flown a plane.
Thank you, Ms. Pride.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper opinion.
Mr. Benker?
If Mr. Ayers could just briefly explain his position here.
This witness has been certified as an expert in handwriting, and she just testified as to an opinion about the possibility of whether Lou Donaldson could have flown a plane on the 17th. This is far outside this witness's scope of expertise.
Your Honor, we can have the testimony striked. We can re-ask the question and just ask for a directed answer.
I am going to strike that answer. If you want to rephrase your question, you may, Mr. Benker.
Ms. Pride, just referring to any specific evidence you found, did you find any specific evidence to suggest that Lou Donaldson flew a plane out of that hangar?
No, with the glasses and the keys in the passenger seat. And no, I did not.
Thank you, Ms. Pride. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bettenker. All right, plaintiff, want to call your next witness.
Your Honor, with that, the plaintiffs rest their case.
All right. At this time, do either parties have any motions for the court?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Ayers.
Your Honor, we move for judgment as a matter of law under Rule 50 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Even under the light most favorable to the non-moving party, no reasonable jury could find that the plaintiff has met their burden in this case. They had to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Ms. Beja killed her husband, and they provided no proof of this accusation. There's no direct evidence, there's no eyewitnesses, and we realize that parties are allowed to use circumstantial evidence here too, but the plaintiff didn't present that either. They presented no physical evidence whatsoever. No blood, no DNA, no hair, no skin, no fingerprints, no body, nothing. The only thing their expert concluded was about the signature on a will. But this isn't a probate case or a case, it's a wrongful death case. And we move for a judgment as a matter of law because they have failed to meet their burden as to the wrongful death claim.
Response, Mr. Bettenker?
Yes, Your Honor. Although it would really be wonderful if there was a video of the defendant killing Lou Donaldson, that's simply not the case here, and that's simply not the case in a lot of cases. What we have is circumstantial evidence, and the jury at this point has heard a ton of circumstantial evidence. They've heard testimony from Cam Donaldson talking about the fact that the defendant has stolen the original last will and testament. She destroyed the original last will and testament. She then went ahead and produced a fraudulent will to get the entirety of the estate. They heard Taylor Pride corroborate and confirm that that will was indeed fraudulent. They also heard testimony of the fact that Karen Bazia had threatened to kill Lou Donaldson, that Lou Donaldson was seeking a divorce from Karen, and that he didn't feel safe around her. There's plenty of circumstantial evidence in this case for a jury to come to the conclusion that the defendant did indeed kill Lou Donaldson.
All right, Mr. Ayers, did you have anything further?
No, Your Honor. I maintain that there is no evidence here that Ms. Beja killed her husband, and no reasonable juror could find that.
Okay. Well, based on Rule 50 of the Civil Rules of Procedure, the court has to look at the evidence in the light most favorable, in this case to the plaintiff, and look at all reasonable facts and inferences from. Based on the evidence, based on the statements, based on the evidence presented by the plaintiff at this time, the court is going to deny the defendant's motion for a directed verdict. Mr. Bedencourt, Mr. Ayers, at this time, defense ready to proceed, or does the parties want a break?
Read request to recess before we begin our case in chief, Your Honor.
Okay, how about we take about a 10-minute break at this point? We'll do a 10-minute recess, be back at 4:10 for the defense's case. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
If we can please have the witnesses do a time check during this time, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, it's 4:10 by my clock. Defense ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. At this
All right.
time, my apologies, Your Honor. This time, the defense calls Karen Asia to the stand.
Okay. Great. When you're ready, Mr. Trevisani.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon. Can you see and hear me okay on your screen, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Hello, my name is Karen Beja.
Where do you live?
I live here in Pioneer. I've lived here my whole life.
When did you meet someone named Lou Donaldson?
That would be 20 years ago.
How did you and Lou meet?
Well, I was hitchhiking and he stopped. I figured he was just a nice guy, but I didn't know he was going to be my soulmate.
When were you and Lou married?
2001.
What did you and Lou like to do together when you were married?
Well, we shared a passion for animals, especially tigers. So we spent most of our time building and growing our animal sanctuary.
How would you describe your relationship with your husband?
I loved him. Our marriage had its ups and downs. All marriages do, but I loved Lou with all of my heart.
Ms. Beja, did you kill your husband?
Absolutely not.
Did you dispose of your husband's body?
No.
What role did you play in your husband's disappearance?
None. I don't know what happened to Lou. All I can say is I had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Well, I want to ask you about what might have happened to him. For starters, ma'am, how many planes did your husband own?
Lou had several planes. I can't even tell you how many.
Now, based on what you know, ma'am, where are some of the places that Lou would fly those planes?
He would fly mostly to Central America, Costa Rica.
When Lou would fly to places like Central America, do you know if he would ever take anyone with him?
No, Lou flew solo.
Now, when Lou would fly solo, did he ever tell you where he was going beforehand?
No, almost never. He would just go. I would only find out later that he'd landed or that he'd come home.
What was the date that your husband went missing?
That would be August 17th, 2012. He drove to the office that morning and I never saw him again.
Ms. Beja, I want you to open up attachment 4 to your deposition and let us know when you have it on your screen.
Yes, I have it here.
What is this photograph?
This is a photo of Lou's van. It was an '89 Dodge Ram.
Does the photo that you're looking at look to be in the same condition as the last time you saw it?
Yes.
Your Honor, we offer this as Defense Exhibit A.
Ms. Grimes, your position?
No objection.
At this time, the court will receive Defense Exhibit A.
May we publish on screen for the members of the jury?
You may.
Now, Ms. Beja, after your husband went missing, when was the next time that you saw this van?
August 25th, 2012, a week after Lou disappeared.
Where was it?
It was at an airstrip, about 40 miles from here.
I want to talk about what was inside the van. If you could open up attachment 5 to your deposition, let us know when you have it on your screen.
Yes, I have it here.
What is it?
Well, this is the inside of Lou's van. This is what it looked like when we saw it at the airstrip.
Does that photograph look to be in the same condition as the last time you saw it?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, we offer this as Defense Exhibit B.
Ms. Grimes, your position?
No objection.
At this time, the court will receive Defense Exhibit B.
May we publish on screen?
You may.
Ms. Beja, do you recognize these glasses?
Yes.
Mr. Ayers, if you could zoom in slightly. And Ms. Beja, I want you to take a good look at these glasses before you answer my question. Whose glasses are they?
These are absolutely Lou's glasses.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. So I want to talk about what you were doing on the night that your husband disappeared. Where were you on August 17th of 2012?
Well, first I was at home, and then I went to the grocery store.
What time did you go to the grocery store?
3 a.m.
Ms. Beja, what were you doing going to the grocery store at 3 a.m.?
Well, I was taking care of some newborn tiger kittens at the time. And as anyone who's raised kids would know, that can mean some sleepless nights. So I had to go out and get some milk and formula for them.
Is there anyone who can confirm where you were that night?
Yes, my brother. My car broke down, so he had to give me a ride home.
That night, ma'am, did you see your husband at all?
No. Earlier in the night, I didn't think much of it. I was in the nursery, so even if he had come home, I wouldn't have seen him. But when I got back from the grocery, Lou wasn't there.
Ms. Beja, have you been sitting there throughout today's trial?
Yes, sir.
I want to ask about some of the claims that the plaintiff has made. Were you here for the testimony that Lou Donaldson asked you for a divorce?
Yes, I was.
Is that true, ma'am?
Yes, Lou did ask me for a divorce that summer. At one point, he also did try to get a restraining order against me.
So to be clear for the members of the jury, ma'am, when Lou disappeared, what was the status of your relationship with your husband?
We were still married. We were still living together, still working together. We talked about our issues and we were trying to work through them.
The plaintiff also spoke at length about a will. Would you recognize that will if I put it up on screen for you?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may we republish, I believe it is Exhibit 3 on screen for the members of the jury?
Yes, you may.
Now, Ms. Beja, according to this will, when was it signed?
June 14th, 2012.
According to this will, how did your husband choose to divide his estate?
He left it to me.
Ms. Beja, how do you explain the fact that this will that leaves you everything is dated just 2 days after that request for a temporary restraining order?
I don't know. I didn't write the will.
All right, I want to ask about the specific claims made by Cam Donaldson. Were you here when Cam testified that you broke in to your husband's office?
Yes, I was here.
Is that true, ma'am? Did you break into your husband's office and steal a lockbox?
Of course not. I was a co-owner. Why would I need to break in?
Ms. Beja, were you ever questioned by the police after your husband
Yes.
disappeared?
Yes, they questioned me and they searched my house.
When you say they searched your house, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, they looked for physical evidence. They even tested our meat grinder that we used to prepare food for the tigers.
So after you were questioned and the police searched your home, were you ever arrested?
No,
After the police questioned you and searched your home, were you ever charged with a crime?
no. They searched my house and that was the end of it.
To the best of your knowledge, ma'am, Were you ever named a suspect?
I was not.
Thank you, Ms. Beja. Your Honor, we have no further questions at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Trevislani. Ms. Grimes, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Baja.
Good evening.
Now, you told us on direct that Lou Donaldson was your soulmate, right?
Absolutely.
So I want to talk about what your relationship was like with your husband before he passed away. Admittedly, you two had problems in your marriage.
We did.
In fact, he asked you for a divorce.
He did.
And he had another woman,
He did at one point, yes.
a mistress.
Yes.
Ms. Baja, your husband was sleeping with another woman.
Yes, at one point he was.
And he also asked the court for a restraining order against you.
He did request a temporary restraining order, yes.
So let's talk about that restraining order. Ms. Baja, you do know how a restraining order works?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the record. May I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, opposing counsel just referred to this as a restraining order multiple times. It was a request for a restraining order, which was denied. We would ask that those specific phrases be stricken from the record so the members of the jury aren't confused into believing that this was actually a restraining order that was granted.
Ms. Grimes.
I can rephrase, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Please do.
Ms. Baja, your husband did request a restraining order from the court.
That's right.
Let's talk about that request. If this restraining order was granted, you do know what that would mean, right?
I suppose, yes.
Lou Donaldson asked the court for a protective order so that you couldn't come within a certain radius of your husband, right?
That's right.
It would restrain you from being around him.
That's true.
Your husband went before a judge and asked the court to keep you physically away from him.
I suppose so.
And on direct, you said that you had nothing to do with your husband's disappearance.
That's right.
Your Honor, permission to republish what's already in evidence marked as Exhibit P4.
You may.
Ms. Baja, here is the document that your husband filed with the court. Please read along silently with me as I read aloud. 2, I am seeking a divorce from Karen Baja. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
And you'll agree that one's true. He was seeking a divorce from you.
Apparently, yes.
And the 3rd one, I do not feel safe around Karen Baja. Did I read that correctly?
You did, Counselor.
Ms. Baja, your husband told the court that he did not feel safe around you.
I suppose so.
Ms. Baja, you heard Cam get up and testify that she heard you threaten to kill Lou Donaldson, right?
I heard her say that, yes.
And you'll agree, a threat to kill is a very serious threat.
I didn't make such a threat, but yes, I would agree with that.
Well, your husband, he did end up dead, didn't he?
Not from me killing him.
Well, you did have him legally declared dead?
I did, after 5 years.
And nobody has seen or heard from your husband in 8 years?
That's true.
And his $5 million life insurance policy, that was paid out to you?
Correct.
And life insurance policies are paid out when someone dies?
Yes.
Okay. And that restraining order, it's dated June 12th, 2012?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the record. Same objection as before.
That request, yeah, I will rephrase. That request for that restraining order, it's dated June 12th of 2012?
Correct.
Now I'd like to talk about your husband's last will and testament. You claim that you witnessed your husband sign that will?
Yes, I did.
On June 14th of 2012?
That's correct.
And that's the same will that granted you sole ownership to his estate?
Exactly.
His estate worth $5 million?
Correct.
So let me get this straight. On June 12th of 2012, your husband asked the court for a restraining order against you?
That's right.
And then 2 days later, he names you sole beneficiary to his $5 million estate. Do I have that right?
You have it right.
But this will It would only go into effect if your husband were to, quote, die or disappear, right?
I suppose so, based on the language, yes.
So let's explore that. Let's talk about where you were on the night that your husband disappeared. You were at home taking care of your newborn tiger cubs?
Correct.
You were alone?
Yes.
Nobody was with you?
Not at the time, no.
And at 3 a.m., you realized that you needed tiger formula.
Exactly.
So you went to go purchase tiger formula.
Correct.
You don't have a receipt for that purchase?
From 8 years ago?
You bought the tiger formula, didn't you?
Yes. 8 years
You don't-
ago?
You don't have a bank statement either?
Nope.
Okay, and on your drive home after purchasing tiger formula at 3 a.m., your car broke down.
Yes, it was a terrible night.
So you called your brother,
I did.
and your brother drove you home.
Yes.
And your brother picked you up at 3:20 a.m.,
Yes, around that time frame, yes.
and he drove you home and dropped you off at 3:45 a.m.?
Yes, that sounds about right.
So, Ms. Baja, that's 25 minutes that you were in the car with your brother?
Approximately, I would agree.
And your alibi on the night that your husband disappeared is a grand total of 25 minutes?
I suppose so.
And as we've established, that alibi starts at 3:20 a.m. on the 18th?
Yes, correct.
You heard Cam testify that the last time that she saw her father was August 17th at 6 p.m.?
I did hear that.
And from 6 p.m. on the 17th until 3:20 a.m. on the 18th, you don't have an alibi.
That's right.
That's a little over 9 hours time.
Suppose so.
That is a 9-hour window on the night that your husband disappeared that is unaccounted for.
Yes, I suppose no one saw me in the nursery at the time.
Now, Ms. Baja, you told us it's typical for your husband to take business trips.
Yes.
He'd be gone days at a time.
Yes, sometimes.
And he'd leave without telling you.
Correct.
And never once in the past, when your husband left without your knowledge, did you report him missing.
No.
This time was different.
Well, yes, it was 3 a.m., so I felt he would have notified me by then.
Well, yeah, because on August 18th, you reported your husband missing, right?
Correct.
And let's talk about what you did on the night that your husband went missing. On the night that your husband went missing, you went to the office to retrieve his last will and testament.
No.
But you'll agree, on the night that your husband went missing, you did go to the office.
I did go to the office.
You'll agree that Cam got up and testified that you broke in and took the will.
I believe she said that was on the 19th, correct, counselor?
No, this is the night that her husband went missing, but at this point, I'll ask the questions. You'll agree, a last will and testament, that's a document for after someone is dead.
Yes.
There's no need to run and go get somebody's will unless that person is dead.
True.
And Ms. Baja, all being said, because of your husband's death, you inherited $10 million. Your
That's correct.
husband has been missing for 8 years now.
That's right.
And over the past 8 years, you have never once tried to call your husband.
No, I disagree. I did try to contact him.
Did try to call your husband?
Of course.
It's your testimony today that you tried to call your husband.
Of course. That's the logical thing to do when I didn't know where he was.
Ms. Baja, this isn't the first time that you've testified in this case, is it?
Well, if you mean by they took my deposition, yes.
Yes, you gave a sworn deposition, right?
Yes, of course.
Attorneys were present.
Yes,
A stenographer was present, taking down every word that you said.
I believe so.
You understood that your answers needed to be truthful.
Absolutely.
You understood that your answers needed to be accurate.
Of course.
This is important. You understood that your answers needed to be complete.
Yes, I answered all the questions asked of me fully.
Now, Ms. Baja, I'd like you to open up to your deposition. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes, I do.
I'll give you a minute, Miss Baja. I'd like you to point me to a place in your deposition where you say that you called your husband.
Ma'am, they never asked me that. I don't know why I would say everything I did that night.
Ma'am, you are aware that you are accused of the wrongful death of your husband?
Of course.
And you didn't think it important to mention that you tried to call your husband after he went missing?
I answered all the questions I was asked, ma'am.
But you didn't think it important to mention that you tried to call your husband after you're being accused of his death?
I answered all the questions I was asked.
Thank you. No further questions.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Beja, after your husband disappeared, was there an investigation?
Yes, the police investigated Lou's disappearance, and I cooperated.
How soon after you discovered that Lou was gone did you report him missing to the police, ma'am?
Immediately. I reported him missing on August 18th.
Thank you, Ms. Beja. Your Honor, we have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Beja. Defense, next witness.
The defense calls Chris Renard.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ayers. When you're ready.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you see and hear me okay?
I can.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Chris Renard, and that's spelled R-E-N-A-R-D.
What do you do for a living, Miss Renard?
I'm a death claims investigator with the Summit Life Insurance Company.
And how are you involved in today's case?
Well, I investigated the disappearance of Lou Donaldson.
Why did you investigate the disappearance of Lou Donaldson?
Well, Karen Baja had filed a claim for life insurance through Summit Life Insurance Company where I work, so I wanted to see if we had a basis to deny that claim.
What would you need in order to deny that claim?
If I found any credible evidence that she was involved in Mr. Donaldson's death.
Before we start talking about this investigation, I want the jury to get a sense of your qualifications. Can you describe your educational background?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in criminology, and then I also graduated from the police academy.
Where have you worked as an investigator?
Well, I started off with the Statesville Bureau of Investigations, and then I've worked at the Summit Life Insurance Company ever since I left the Bureau of Investigation.
So total, how many years experience do you have as an investigator?
23 now.
Do you have experience interviewing witnesses?
I do.
What about reviewing documents?
Yes, I do.
Do you have experience investigating possible crimes?
Yes, I do.
Ms. Renard, do you have any specific experience in death claims investigations?
I do. I mean, I do that as part of my job, and then I also receive annual training in death claims investigations.
Your Honor, we offer Ms. Renard as an expert in death claims investigations.
Mr. Bettinger,
Yes, Your Honor, just a brief voir dire.
you may.
Ms. Renard, you attended the Statesville Police Academy in 1996,
I did.
and then you were hired by the Statesville Bureau of Investigations.
Yes.
And to be specific, you were working as a crime lab forensic document examiner.
Yes, that's correct.
So your work was being done in a crime lab. It wasn't necessarily being done in the field.
Right, I wasn't an actual police officer.
You were given documents that detectives had found, and then you performed forensic document analysis on those documents.
That is what I did with the Statesville Bureau of Investigation, yes.
And at no point during your career with the Statesville Bureau of Investigations did you work as a field detective.
No, but I still went through the police academy and received that training, but formally, no, I didn't work in the field.
You were never hired as a homicide detective.
No, I wasn't.
So it's fair to say that your experience and training, it was tailored to forensic document examination.
Well, my training was the general police academy that everyone goes through, but the work I did was for document examination.
No further questions. Your Honor, we have no objection to this expert being offered as an expert in forensic document examinations, qualified to look at whether a document is forged. However, in this expert's report, they go on and they give opinions that are well beyond the scope of a handwriting expert. Your Honor, there are 3 opinions in particular that we are concerned with. Ms. Renard says that it is her opinion that Ms. Bazia did not kill her husband. She says it's her opinion that her husband more likely died in a plane crash on his way to Costa Rica. And then she goes on to say that it is her opinion that if the sheriff's office believed that Ms. Bazia killed her husband, they would have done something about this. None of this would be admissible testimony from a handwriting expert, and we just heard this witness has no experience as a detective, no experience as a person who's solving crimes, and they do not have the experience necessary under 702A to be able to give any of those opinions. Further, they haven't based their opinions on sufficient facts or data as required by 702B, and they have not reviewed any police reports. They don't go into any discussion in the report as to the principles and methods they used, nor do they have any training in this field to even use reliable principles and methods under 702C or apply them under 702D. As such, Your Honor, for those, and specifically for those 3 opinions, they do not reach any of the 702 prongs, and we ask that they be prohibited from testifying on those 3 opinions.
Mr. Ayers, your response?
Your Honor, first, we haven't asked this witness to give any opinions or expert conclusions yet. And the expertise that I asked her to be qualified in by the court is in death claims investigations, something this witness has certainly shown that she has the foundation to have expertise in. She's worked as a death claims investigator for 20 years. Opposing counsel tried to say that she had no experience or training in regular police matters, but Your Honor, the witness just said that's not true. She went through the same police academy that any police officer went through. The fact that she went into a different and in fact more specific career after that, into death claims investigations, shouldn't stop her from being able to testify about, well, the investigations that she undertook in this case.
All right. Based on that, I am going to accept Ms. Renard as an expert in death claims investigation. Mr. Ayers, if you want to continue your direct examination.
Ms. Renard, let's talk about your investigation in this case. Now, you said that you were investigating the disappearance of Lou Donaldson. What possibilities did you look into as part of that investigation?
Well, I looked into 2 primary possibilities. The first being the plaintiff's theory that Ms. Bazia had something to do with Mr. Donaldson's death. And then the second one was the possibility that Mr. Donaldson accidentally crashed his plane somewhere between Statesville and Costa Rica.
Let's talk about the first of those possibilities, that first theory you investigated, the plaintiff's theory that Ms. Bazia had something to do with Lou Donaldson's disappearance. Now, why did you investigate that?
Well, in the event of Mr. Donaldson's death, Ms. Bazia would receive about $10 million.
When you're looking into a theory like this, what sort of evidence do you tend to focus on?
Well, I'd look to see if there are any eyewitnesses, and then also if there's any physical evidence.
Let's start off with the eyewitnesses. Did you perform any interviews as a part of your investigation?
I did. I spoke with several members of Lou Donaldson's family, and then I also spoke with some of his friends and business associates.
You said you spoke to some members of Lou Donaldson's family. Did you speak, or did you have a statement from the plaintiff, Cam Donaldson?
I did.
Did you have a statement from the sheriff's department?
I did. I have a contact there, so I received some information about their investigation.
Other than these interviews, what other evidence did you collect?
I also reviewed some financial records from Mr. Donaldson, as well as the police reports from the investigation and some photographs of Mr. Donaldson's car.
And at the end of your investigation, what eyewitness evidence had you found linking Karen Bazia with her husband's disappearance?
There's none.
At the end of your investigation, what physical evidence had you found linking Karen Bazia with her husband's disappearance?
Again, there's none.
So let's talk about the second possibility that you said you investigated, the idea that Lou Donaldson could have died in a plane crash. Why were you looking into that?
Well, according to the plaintiff, Lou Donaldson was a pilot, and he often flew his plane and took trips to Costa Rica.
When you were investigating this possibility, what evidence did you focus on?
I focused on his van that was found in the investigation.
Your Honor, may we republish what's already in evidence as Defense Exhibit A, it's the photograph of the van?
You may.
Miss Renard, have you seen this photograph before?
I have. This is the photograph of Mr. Donaldson's van.
Why were you investigating Lou Donaldson's van as a part of this theory?
Well, both because of where it was found as well as what was found inside of it.
Where was it found?
It was found in an airstrip.
And what was found inside it?
Mr. Donaldson's glasses were found inside of it.
Your Honor, may we republish what's already in evidence as Defense Exhibit B, the photograph of the glasses?
You may.
Miss Renard, why were these glasses significant to your investigation?
Well, the plaintiff has said that Mr. Donaldson wasn't used to flying without his glasses.
I want to push back on this theory slightly. In the course of your investigation, what evidence did you find of a flight plan or flight log filed by Lou Donaldson the weekend he went missing?
So I didn't find any actual evidence of a flight plan or a flight log, but I did find some evidence of why there isn't one.
Can you explain to the jury what you mean by that?
Well, the plaintiff has said that her father's pilot's license was suspended, and she said that instead of stopping flying, he would still continue to fly, but he just wouldn't log his flights.
Now, you said earlier that you also reviewed some financial statements in this case. Did you look at any financial statements when you were investigating the theory that Lou Donaldson died in a plane crash?
I did. I looked at Mr. Donaldson's bank records from 2012 through 2017.
In your electronic notebook, can you find the document called Bank Account Statement? And let me know when you've got it in front of you.
Yes, I've got it.
What is it?
This is the bank account statement that I was referring to that's of Lou Donaldson's account from 2012 to 2017.
Your Honor, this document comes with a business record certification from the bank manager of Statesville National Bank. We offer it now into evidence as Defense Exhibit C.
Mr. Betancourt?
Without objection, Your Honor.
All right. The court will admit or will accept Defense Exhibit C.
Permission to publish on screen?
You may.
Now, Ms. Renard, when you were investigating whether Lou Donaldson could have died in a plane crash, was this bank account statement significant?
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, as you can see on there, his bank activity just stops on August 17th. And prior to that, there were several transactions.
Why was that significant?
Well, I mean, if he died in a plane crash that night, then that would explain why his bank account activity just stops.
Thank you, Mr. Trevisani. Ms. Renard, at the end of your investigation, what did you do?
I recommended and I had our insurance company pay out the life insurance claim to Ms. Baja.
Thank you, Ms. Renard. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Mr. Betancourt.
Ms. Renard, you're an insurance investigator.
Yes, I'm a death claims investigator.
Well, let's talk about how life insurance works. It's a form of insurance to help your loved ones once you die.
Yes, it is.
A person will pay into a life insurance policy, and then in the event of death, life insurance, it's paid out to the beneficiary.
Right.
And life insurance, well, it's only paid out when a person is dead.
Correct.
The whole point is that you're insuring your life.
Exactly.
So if a person was missing, well, life insurance, it wouldn't be triggered and it can't be paid out.
Yes, that's true.
So in the case of Mr. Donaldson, you recommended that this insurance be paid.
Yes, because I believe that he's dead.
Let's back up a moment. Let's talk about how you got involved in this case. You were assigned to investigate the death of Lou Donaldson.
I was.
The CEO of your company actually assigned you to that.
Correct.
And to determine whether Miss Baja killed her husband.
Yeah, to determine whether we had a claim to deny the life insurance claim.
But specifically, the CEO of your company, he asked you to determine whether Miss Baja killed her husband.
Sure, because that would give us a basis to deny the claim.
And your expertise, well, it was needed here because the validity of Mr. Donaldson's will was in question.
That was part of it, yes.
So part of determining whether Karen Baja killed her husband is determining whether the signature on that will is forged.
That's something that contributed in my investigation, but it wasn't the only thing.
Because, well, people who kill their husbands, they don't get life insurance payouts, do they, Ms. Renard?
Right, that would give us a basis to deny a claim.
Let's go ahead and let's talk about that will for a moment. You reviewed Mr. Donaldson's last will and testament,
I did.
and in your time at Summit Life Insurance, you have reviewed hundreds of wills.
I have.
You're familiar with the standard language that's used in wills.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen hundreds, so I've seen what's typically in there.
And you found that the will in this case, it contained the phrase, "if I ever disappear."
It did.
You found that language suspicious.
I hadn't seen it before.
Right, you've never actually seen that before in a will.
Right.
So we can agree that you found it suspicious.
Sure, just because I hadn't seen it before.
Let's go ahead and talk about that signature on the will. Now, Ms. Renard, you're an expert in handwriting analysis,
I am.
and you reviewed 3 signatures in coming to your conclusion.
Yes, I did.
One of those signatures was from Mr. Lou Donaldson's life insurance paperwork that you had on file at Summit.
Yes.
One of those signatures you actually obtained yourself by pulling his driver's license with the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Right.
And, well, the last signature, that's the one on the will, the one that you were tasked with investigating.
Correct.
And then you went ahead and you completed a signature comparison.
I did.
And, well, you would recognize the signature comparison you created if I showed it to you, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Your Honor, permission to republish what has been admitted into evidence as P5.
You may.
Ms. Grimes? And Ms. Renard, I have displayed on my screen a copy of that signature comparison. Correct.
Yes.
That's your signature that's on the bottom of this document?
Yes, it is.
You did, in fact, prepare this document.
I did.
Your Honor, permission to zoom into the notes section of this document?
You may.
Now, in this document, you state, "I cannot say the signature on the will is either genuine or non-genuine." Did I read that correctly, Ms. Renard?
Yes, that's true.
These are your words I'm reading, aren't they, Ms. Renard?
Yes, they are.
You then also state, "It could also be possible that someone tried to copy Mr. Donaldson's signature." Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, it's a possibility.
We could take that down now. So after you compared the handwriting, you went ahead and you contacted the people who witnessed the signature.
Yeah, I did.
Because, well, that information, it could help you determine the authenticity of this will.
I could.
And 2 people witnessed this signature.
Correct.
Samantha Lane was one of them, and the defendant, she was the other.
Yes,
And then you went ahead and you contacted Samantha Lane.
I did.
And when you spoke to her, she said she had seen the signing take place.
Yes, that's what she said.
But then a month later, you received a letter in the mail.
I received a letter, yes.
And that letter, it stated on it that it was from Samantha Lane.
Maybe. I mean, I wasn't able to verify who that letter was actually from.
Now, I'm not asking if you verified. I'm asking if the letter stated that it was from Samantha Lane.
It was signed by a Samantha Lane, yes.
And now take a look at that letter that you submitted as an attachment to your report. It's date stamped Exhibit 8. And just let me know when you're there.
Yes, I have it.
You recognize this document?
I do.
This is a copy of the letter that you received in the mail?
Yes, it is.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of the letter that you received in the mail?
It is.
Your Honor, I offer Exhibit 8 into evidence. We'll call it P6. Permission to publish to the jury?
All right, Mr. Ayers, your position?
I object to this letter, Your Honor, as hearsay, and additionally that it's inauthentic under Rule 901.
Mr. Bettencourt, your response?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll answer the authentication argument first. Your Honor, the standard for authentication that's laid out in the Federal Rules of Evidence is just that it is a fair and accurate copy of the document it purports to be. Ms. Renard, she just testified that this is a fair and accurate copy of the letter that she received in the mail. That's the standard under Federal Rule of Evidence 901. She did just authenticate it. Your Honor, regarding hearsay, this is admissible under Rule 705. Ms. Renard is an expert in forensic document analysis. Ms. Renard reviewed this letter, informing her opinion. These are the underlying facts and data that experts in this field rely on. And this is the underlying facts and data that she may be required to disclose when she's asked on cross under Rule 705. Furthermore, Your Honor, If it is counsel's position that Ms. Renard, she didn't take this letter into account when she was forming her expert opinion, then we won't offer it for the truth of the matter asserted. We'll just offer it to show that Ms. Renard was put on notice to the fact that one of only 2 witnesses to the signing of this will, they didn't actually see the document. And the other witness is the defendant. We're offering it to show what Ms. Renard did once she was put on notice that one of the witnesses never actually saw it.
First,
Mr. Ayers, did you want to respond?
Yes. First, as to the authentication issue, the rule under 901 is that the document must be, under 901, in order to authenticate or identify an item of evidence, the proponent has to produce evidence sufficient to support a finding that the item is what the proponent claims it to be. Now, Your Honor, this witness has already said that she believed this to be a letter that was signed by someone who said they were Samantha Lane. She never said that this was a letter from Samantha Lane, and it's our contention that the plaintiff is explicitly trying to bring this in as a letter from Samantha Lane. This witness, if she were questioned, would say that she believed this letter to be a hoax. She believed this letter to not be credible, and accordingly, she didn't rely on it in the course of her investigation. As such, anything contained within that letter isn't admissible, as it's both hearsay as well as irrelevant, Your Honor. This witness will say that she didn't rely upon the letter whatsoever in coming to her expert conclusions.
Your Honor, if I may?
Yes, briefly.
The standard under 901 is just that the proponent must produce evidence sufficient to support a finding that the item is what the proponent claims it is. The proponent was asked, "Is this the letter you received in the mail?" She responded, "This is the letter I received in the mail. It has been properly authenticated." Now, whether or not this is Samantha Lane's actual letter, that goes to the weight of the evidence, not to the admissibility of the evidence. And again, regarding hearsay, if they are claiming that this expert in forensic document analysis did not actually review this letter, then we need to use this letter to show that this expert was put on notice that only one of 2 witnesses claims to have seen this, with the other one saying she had never actually seen the sign.
I do have concerns about foundational and hearsay concerns. So at this time, I am going to sustain the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, just for a point of clarification, may this witness still be questioned on the letter that she received in the mail without the letter being introduced to evidence?
You may, for purposes of her investigation and the completeness of her investigation, but the content of the letter, no.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Ms. Renard, you did receive a letter in the mail.
I did receive a letter, yes.
And when you received this letter, it bore on it, as you said, a signature from Samantha Lane.
It was signed by Samantha Lane. Like I said, I was never able to verify who it came from.
And that letter, we don't know who sent it to you, but we do know that in it, it said that the person who wrote it hadn't actually seen a will get signed.
Objection, Your Honor. This was explicitly deemed inadmissible in your ruling.
I agree. The contents of the letter, I'm going to sustain that objection. In case I was not clear, Mr. Banker, I don't have a problem with you asking questions as far as her follow-up investigation with regard to the letter, but the actual contents of the letter itself, I'm going to sustain that objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Renard, you testified regarding the police investigation.
Yes.
We're not actually able to review any documents or evidence from the police department.
No, I wasn't.
Ms. Renard, you heard that Cam Donaldson said on direct that Lou was blind as a bat, correct?
Yes.
And then you found that glasses were left inside of Lou Donaldson's van?
I did.
You were investigating this case in 2017.
Yes, that's correct.
So we can agree that you were never actually able to see if Lou Donaldson could see without his glasses?
I mean, no.
And we can agree that if Lou Donaldson was blind as a bat, it would be pretty hard for him to attempt to even get a plane onto a runway.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the point, is that if he was flying without his glasses, it would have been pretty dangerous.
We can agree that it would have been pretty difficult for him to even have gotten a plane onto the runway if he was blind as a bat, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation about the exact level of poor eyesight that Lou Donaldson had. This is far outside this witness's level of expertise.
Based on the fact that, or I'm sorry, Mr. Betancourt, do you have a response?
No, Your Honor. This question is calling for speculation.
Based on the fact that this expert was qualified as an expert in death claims investigation, I'm going to overrule that objection. You may proceed.
Ms. Renard, I'll ask you one more time. It would be difficult, nearly impossible, for Mr. Donaldson to try and get a plane onto a runway if he is blind as a bat, correct?
Well, counsel, as you said, I don't know because I didn't speak to Lou Donaldson about precisely how blind he was, so I can't speculate whether he would have been able to get a plane on the runway or not.
Ms. Renard, I'm asking you, if Mr. Donaldson was blind as a bat, it would have been nearly impossible for him to get a plane on the runway, correct?
Objection asked and answered.
Your Honor, she has not answered the question.
I agree. You may go ahead and I'm going to overrule that objection and you may ask your question again, Mr. Betancourt.
Ms. Renard, we can agree that if Mr. Donaldson was blind as a bat, it would have been nearly impossible for him to have even gotten a plane onto the runway, correct?
Again, counsel, I can't speculate to that. Runways are pretty big. He could drive the plane certainly onto a runway. I don't know.
No further questions.
Redirect, Mr. Ayers.
No redirect. May this witness be excused.
She may. Thank you. Defense, call your next witness.
No further witnesses from the defense, Your Honor. At this time, we rest our case in chief and request a brief recess prior to closing argument.
Okay. Same for the defense, or I'm sorry, for the plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we can do a time check as well. And we can, how about we reconvene at 5:05?
Sounds perfect, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Closing arguments. Let's start with the plaintiff. Who's doing first close?
Right here, Your Honor.
Mr. Benker. There you are. Mr. Benker, when you're ready. Thank you.
May it please the court. Just 2 weeks after Lou Donaldson, before Lou Donaldson was killed, he told his daughter Cam, if anything ever happens to me, be sure to have the police look into Karen. Look into Karen. Members of the jury, that is straight from Lou Donaldson's lips. He saw the writing on the wall. He knew that when the defendant threatened to kill him, she meant it. He knew he should fear for her safety because he knew what she was capable of. And some of his last words, look into Karen. So today, we looked into the defendant and we proved to you 4 things by preponderance of the evidence. Now, members of the jury, as you recall, all preponderance of the evidence means is more likely than not. More likely than not, well, Lou Donaldson, he's dead. More likely than not, Karen Bazia's intentional conduct, that's the reason he's dead. More likely than not, Cam Donaldson, she suffered damages due to the death of her father. Or more likely than not, Karen Bazia is the reason for those damages. So let's walk through the evidence you heard today and how we proved our case to you. Now, the first thing we proved to you is that Lou Donaldson, he is in fact dead. You know Lou Donaldson is dead because nobody has seen him in 8 years. You know he's dead because his bank statement shows no activity after he disappeared. You know he's dead because a court had him declared legally dead. You know he's dead because his life insurance policy was paid out. And most of all, you know he's dead because the defense, they admit he's dead. Now, the second thing we proved to you is that Karen Bazia's intentional conduct, that is the reason that Lou Donaldson is dead. How do we know that? Well, we know that Karen killed Lou Donaldson because her actions before and after his death, they're a confession of what she did. But to really see that confession play out, we need a timeline of events in this case. And Ms. Grimes, can we get a timeline started for the jury? Now, the first date that we have to talk about, well, that's August 17th at 6 p.m. You see, that is the last time that Lou Donaldson was seen. Just 36 hours later, the defendant is seen. She's seen breaking into Cam's office, cutting through a lock, cutting through a fence, setting off a security alarm, and stealing Lou Donaldson's original last will and testament. And she is caught. She's caught red-handed, but she's grinning. She's grinning from ear to ear. She looks at Cam. She tells, I won everything. It's going to be mine. Members of the jury, a last will and testament, it means nothing if Lou Donaldson is alive. The only reason for the defendant to break into Cam's office on August 19, just 36 hours after Lou has disappeared, it's if she already knows that he's dead. And of course she does. She killed him. And just think about this, members of the jury. Her husband has just disappeared. And her first move is to go and take his last will and testament? Those are not the actions of a loving, concerned wife. Those are the actions of the woman who killed him. And so what happened to Lou Donaldson's original last will and testament? Well, you would have to ask the defendant. But what we do know is that 5 years later, she went to the court and she produced a fraudulent last will and testament. A last will and testament that has red flag after red flag all over it. I mean, we can go ahead and start with the bizarre language of, if I should die or disappear, a phrase that is so rare that you heard defendant's own expert admit it was suspicious. She had never seen that in a will before. But the biggest red flag of all, that would be Lou Donaldson's signature on the will. I mean, a blatant forgery. And Ms. Grimes, can we get Ms. Pride's report up? When Ms. Taylor Pride, when she took the stand, she took us step by step through her report. And you can see it for yourself. This is obviously a forgery. And just to be clear, the defendant's expert did not say anything otherwise. They admitted they're not sure. This could be a non-genuine signature. It could be forged. The defense's own expert admitted it. And as if the signature isn't enough or the language, well, we got to talk about the date on this last will and testament. This last will and testament was dated June 14th, 2012. That is exactly 2 days after Lou Donaldson went to the court and he asked the court for a restraining order against the defendant. The defense wants you to believe that 2 days after Lou Donaldson felt it was so important, so necessary, that he go to a court and ask for a restraining order against the defendant, just 2 days later, well, he decided to cut his own daughter out of his will and leave everything he has ever owned to the same person he just asked for a restraining order against. And did you hear any evidence at all today to suggest that Lou Donaldson would cut his own daughter out of his will? Of course not. Lou Donaldson, he loved his daughter. So how else do we know that Karen Bozia killed her husband? Well, how about the fact that nobody, including the defendant, can account for her whereabouts for the first 9 hours of Lou Donaldson's disappearance? Ms. Grimes, can we get that timeline back up? Now, we know that Lou Donaldson was last seen alive on August 17th at 6 p.m. Ms. Bozia, well, she was nice enough to tell us that she has an alibi. On August 18th at 3 a.m., well, she went out to go get Tiger formula. What Ms. Bozia forgot to notice is that is not how an alibi works. That is a 9-hour window that she is completely and utterly unaccounted for. And the fact that she will not tell us what she was doing during those 9 hours or where she was, that's evidence of the fact that she killed Lou Donaldson. And when faced with this evidence, what does the defense say? Well, we don't know. We're not sure. Lou Donaldson, we're not positive he's dead. He might have actually just died in a plane crash. The defendant had Lou Donaldson declared legally dead. The defendant, she went ahead. She cashed out his $5 million life insurance policy. Lou Donaldson, he is dead. Now, the other thing the defense decided to do today, they decided to tell you, oh, you know what? Maybe he died on a plane crash to Costa Rica. The defense, they have no burden in this case. But when they choose to present evidence to you, well, it's your job to analyze it. But what evidence did you actually hear? Yes, Lou Donaldson's van. It was found in an airstrip. There's no indication that Lou Donaldson had a plane at that airstrip. In fact, you heard Cam tell us, she's positive Lou did not have a plane at that airstrip. Yes, Lou, he was a pilot. There's no indication that he ever got on a plane. There's no indication that he ever took off. There's no indication that he tried to fly to Costa Rica. There's certainly no indication of a plane crash. What there is evidence of, though, is that Lou Donaldson did not have his glasses with him. You heard Cam tell you, Lou Donaldson was blind as a bat. Getting onto a plane without your glasses, you couldn't even see the instrument cluster. They want you to believe that Lou Donaldson, an experienced pilot, decided he was going to leave his glasses on the seat next to him. He was going to get into a plane without being able to see, and then he was somehow, miraculously, going to try to get a plane he can't see onto the runway. And then, miraculously, he somehow managed to take off this plane. That's what they want you to believe? When the defense presents to you theories without any evidence whatsoever, that's all they are. Theories, not what actually happened to Lou Donaldson. Now, members of the jury, when you go back and deliberate, you are going to have two verdict forms available to you. We are going to ask that you use verdict form A. And Ms. Grimes, can we get a copy of verdict form A up for the jury? Now, this right here, this is the verdict form that holds Karen Baja responsible for what she did to Lou Donaldson and Lou Donaldson's family. And as you can see, well, there's a line on this form. It asks you to assess damages. There's no price tag on a human life. There's no price tag that you can put on one more conversation with your father or one more holiday together. There's certainly no price tag that Cam could put on getting to have one more hug with her dad. Him holding her close, telling her, I'm proud of you. I love you. Those things, they are worth so much more than money. And in a court of law, we give you the impossible task of trying to assign a dollar figure. So what I can tell you is this. Lou Donaldson, the defendant, does not get to kill Lou Donaldson, take Cam's father out of her life forever, and then steal $10 million. She has already gotten away with murder. Don't let her get away with the money too. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Defense close.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, we would ask that Your Honor instruct the jury to disregard a portion of that closing argument, specifically the demonstrative, which stated restraining order rather than request for a temporary restraining order. Your Honor, this is exactly why we objected earlier on in trial. It's exactly what we contended that opposing counsel would be attempting to do with this piece of evidence. And that's exactly why it needs to be kept from the jury. So we would just ask for an instruction to disregard that portion of the demonstrative.
Mr. Bettencourt, any response?
Yes, Your Honor, during closing arguments, we made it clear. It was a request for a restraining order. However, if there is anything on the demonstrative that includes simply the words restraining order, we ask that we constructively add the words request for a restraining order to clear up this issue.
Well, I'm going to allow the jury to consider the evidence as they recall. It is closing statements and closing arguments. So at this point, I would just instruct the jury to rely on the juror's own memory and leave it at that when defense is ready to close.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, permission to publish any exhibits that have been entered into evidence on screen?
Yes, you may.
May I proceed?
You may.
2,969. That's how many days it's been since Lou Donaldson went missing. And in 2,969 days, no one has found his body. Not the plaintiff, not the police, not the private eyes. Why? Because they were looking for a murder victim. Even after Lou Donaldson's van was found at an airstrip, no one considered the obvious. That when an aging man flies alone at night without his glasses, his plane might go down. That's why no one has found Lou Donaldson's body. You see, when someone's murdered, it's hard to hide a body. But when a plane goes down in the middle of the ocean, it's hard to find a body. Members of the jury, this was not a crime. It was a crash. Today, the plaintiff and the plaintiff alone had the burden of proof. They had to show that each and every element of their case was more likely than not true. Today, they failed to meet that burden because of two simple facts. Let's take them one at a time. Fact number one, this was not a crime. Today, the plaintiff spent an awful lot of time trying to convince you that Lou Donaldson is dead. No one disputes that. The question is how Lou Donaldson died. Folks, there's no evidence of homicide here. Sure, they told you a dramatic story where Lou Donaldson comes out, he tells his daughter, if something happens to me, tell the police to look into Karen. They said it over and over and over again. They need you to believe that that statement, that Lou actually said that. They said that it came straight from Lou Donaldson's lips. No. Straight from the plaintiff's lips. The plaintiff who wants $10 million. They told you a dramatic story about a shouting match between Lou Donaldson and his wife. Who did it come from? The plaintiff who wants $10 million. We heard a dramatic story about a break-in. That Miss Beja broke into her husband's office, stole financial documents, that she was there with someone that had lock cutters. The police were there. Where's the jury? How many of the people that were there that day took the stand to tell you about it? Did you see an alarm, a report from the alarm company that an alarm went off? Did you see any police reports? Did any police officers take the stand to say that that happened? No. It all came from the plaintiff who wants $10 million. Sure, they showed you some photographs. They showed you this photograph here of the gate, that it was broken, that this is proof that Miss Beja broke in. Members of the jury, something's missing from this photograph. Miss Beja. And if you think about it, the story that the plaintiff needs you to believe about this break-in, it just doesn't add up. Why would Miss Beja need to break in to the office when she was a co-owner of the company. Now today, opposing counsel also spoke at length about a request for a temporary restraining order. Members of the jury, let's be clear. This request was denied. At no point, no matter how much the plaintiff wants you to believe it, at no point was there a restraining order against Karen Beja. They also called Taylor Pride to the stand. She spoke at length about handwriting. She spoke to you about a will. She talked about this will, all the work that she did around it, all the surrounding circumstances. It was pretty compelling, Your Honor. It was almost distracting enough to make me forget that this is a wrongful death case. It's not a forgery case, members of the jury. It's not a probate case. They have to show specific conduct from Miss Beja killed Lou Donaldson, and they failed. Today, they said that Miss Beja's behavior was suspicious on August 17th of 2012. Members of the jury, I want you to think about that for a moment, the story that the plaintiff is telling you. Because if Miss Beja, years after the fact, after she had time to think, came up with a story about what she did that night, don't you think that she could have come up with something better? You see, the plaintiff wants to have it both ways. On the one hand, Miss Beja is a master criminal. She can make a body disappear without a trace of evidence. On the other hand, she wasn't smart enough to come up with something better. Members of the jury, so far I've focused on the evidence the plaintiff did present. But let's remember the evidence that the plaintiff didn't present. Miss Beja was investigated thoroughly. Not once, not twice, 3 times. First, the police came into her home. They searched every square inch, found nothing. Then the insurance company paid Chris Renard to look for any reason to deny Miss Beja's claim. Then the plaintiff sent folks to investigate Miss Beja. What did all of these investigations have in common? They found zero, zip, zilch, nothing. There's no eyewitness evidence that a crime took place here. No one took the stand and told you that they even saw Karen Beja and her husband together at all the weekend that he went missing. There's certainly no physical evidence of a crime. No blood, no DNA, no fingerprints. The plaintiff's own expert, she told us, we don't have the most basic elements of a crime here. Although admittedly, members of the jury, it wasn't easy to get those answers out of her. I mean, you heard when Mr. Ayers got up here to cross-examine her. He asked her, "Did you find DNA?" She said, "No, but not every crime leaves DNA." Okay. He asked her, "Did you find blood?" "No, but not every crime involves blood." Okay. Mr. Ayers asked her, "Did you find a body?" She said, "No, but not every crime has a body, involves a body." Maybe opposing counsel, maybe they can point you to an example of a murder where there's no blood. Maybe they can find you a case where there was a murder and no DNA. Maybe they can dig deep and find you a case where there was a murder and no body. Members of the jury, a murder without any of those things, that's a murder that didn't happen. Now, normally, when you accuse someone of killing another human being, normally you have evidence. At the very least, you have a theory. A theory is Colonel Mustard in the library with a revolver. Their theory is Karen Beja in the somewhere with the something. The plaintiff has failed to meet their burden. So you might be asking yourself, okay, if she didn't kill him, then what happened? If this wasn't a crime, then what was it? That brings us to point number 2. It was a crash. Today we learned that Lou Donaldson loved to fly. He flew all the time, especially to Central America. And where was his van found? But an airstrip. Members of the jury, this is actually the biggest clue that we have as to what happened the night that Lou went missing. The plaintiff told us that when he drove that van away on August 17th, she didn't know where he was going. But that van was found at an airstrip just 40 miles away from the office. And Lou Donaldson, he was never seen again. Now, the plaintiff did the best that they could to explain away, wave away this explanation of events. They talked about these glasses. You heard opposing counsel. He tried to get that point out there multiple times. He was blind as a bat. He couldn't even get onto the runway without those glasses. Members of the jury, who did that testimony come from? I mean, the experts in this case, they can tell you he never flew without his glasses, which we agree. He needed those glasses to fly safely, but who told you that he couldn't do anything without them? The plaintiff, who wants $10 million. They said, well, he didn't tell anyone that he was going to Costa Rica or anywhere else that weekend, so he must not have gone. Members of the jury, we know that Lou Donaldson would often take off and he wouldn't tell anyone about his trip until afterwards. They say we don't have a flight log. We don't know that he had any plans to fly that day. And members of the jury, that's true. Lou Donaldson, he didn't log his flights. That means that no one at the airstrip knew that he needed help, and no one in the air knew to avoid him. Today, the plaintiff's expert, she testified that she sent folks to Costa Rica, that there was no evidence that Lou Donaldson even stepped foot in Costa Rica. And we agree. Lou Donaldson took off that night. He just never landed. Maybe they'll tell you there's no evidence of a plane crash here, but the truth is no one looked for evidence of a plane crash. The police, they searched here in Statesville. The plaintiff sent investigators to Costa Rica, but no one searched the 2,200 miles in between. The fact is, there is evidence of a plane crash. A plane crash explains why there's no blood. A plane crash explains why there are no eyewitnesses. A plane crash explains why 8 years later, no one has found Lou Donaldson's body. All of the evidence that is missing from their theory is explained by ours. Members of the jury, in a moment, opposing counsel is going to come back up here. I expect that they'll mock the idea of a plane crash. That's why you have to ask yourself a critical question. What is more likely? That a woman who cares for cats was able to pull off the murder of the century without leaving a speck of physical evidence, of evading 3 different investigations? Or that an aging pilot flying alone, flying at night, flying 2,200 miles, flying without his license, flying without his glasses, didn't come home? Members of the jury, I submit to you that our version of events is far more likely. But we didn't have the burden. The plaintiff had the burden. Not a burden of rumors, not a burden of speculation, a burden of proof. Today, they failed to bring you that proof. We ask that you return a verdict in favor of Miss Baja, because this was not a crime. It was a crash. Thank you for your time.
All right, can we get just a quick time check for rebuttal for the plaintiff? And when you are ready, Mr. Bettencourt.
Yes, Your Honor, as soon as we get that time check.
Perfect.
Your Honor, I have that there's still like 7 minutes left in plaintiff's closing.
Great. All right. Thank you.
I
When you're
promise
ready.
I'll use 7 minutes.
Okay.
Members of the jury, the defense has gone.
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff has 3.5 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay.
I also promise I won't use an entire 3.5 minutes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Members of the jury, the defense has gone out of their way to tell you that this restraining order was denied. And it shocks me. Because had that restraining order been granted, the defendant would have had protection from the court. He would have had protection from Karen Baja. Maybe he would be alive today. Maybe none of us would be here. Maybe Cam would have her dad with her. But as defense counsel loves to point out, it was denied. That means Karen Baja was allowed to be around Lou. He was stripped of any protection from the woman who threatened to kill him. Members of the jury, they want you to believe he died in a plane crash, but they haven't provided you any evidence to prove that. They call him an old pilot. So ask yourself that critical question. Why would Lou, an old pilot, even try and fly a plane without his glasses? Members of the jury, you have a real opportunity today. You can take Lou's estate out of the wrong hands and put it into the right ones. You can demand that the defendant return what she stole from Cam and her father. We ask you to find the only conclusion that the evidence is supported. Find Karen Baja liable. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Well done. Congratulations. Well done. And then Kevin, where do we go from here?
As far as I have been, oh, perfect. Different Kevin.
Excellent job. Really
Yes.
excellent job. So for scoring jurors and for your honor, you'll go to the base camp site, you'll enter in your information, and then you will the scoring and feedback. And so for the advocates, we are going to provide the feedback for you as well. And so we'll have that, and we'll see you at the award ceremony this evening. Thank you all. Excellent job.
Thank you. Good to see you guys
Thank
again.
you very much.
Council, thank you. That was